Hello, you're very welcome to On the Level. My name is Fergus Thompson, and once again we're in East Beijing today to talk to author and journalist Wang Chong about journalism in the United States, but particularly here in China. Wang Chong, very welcome to On the Level.
My pleasure.
Now, Wang Chong, you studied English originally and then international relations. You've also spent some time in Germany. Currently, you're Director of International News at China Weekly. Now, that's a well-known current affairs magazine here in China. You've also been a chief reporter at the China Youth Daily, another prestigious newspaper here in China, and you're a frequent commentator on television, and you write for other publications. Now, back in 2004, you travelled across the United States for the presidential elections at that time. And during that time, you interviewed a then little-known senator from Illinois by the name of Barack Obama and became the first Chinese journalist to interview him. Now, you're also the author of a book called Behind the Ballot, Looking at US Elections and Political Culture. That was published in 2008.
Yes.
In Chinese.
Yes, in Chinese
right,
only.
It may come out in English, who knows, that would be great, but for Chinese readers at the moment. And as well as a journalist, you are a prolific blogger and a very popular blogger. In fact, you've had around 12 million page views in just over 2 years. Now, first, I'd like to go back, before we talk about journalism in general, I'd like to go back to 2004 and that interview with Barack Obama. After that, you wrote an article in which you predicted that this senator from Illinois could well become the first African-American president of the United States. What was it about what he said or your meeting that led you to that conclusion?
Well, it's a long story to tell. During the year of 2004, I was invited by the State Department to report on the presidential election of that year. When I was there, after just 10 days, I found the result is done. You know, the George W. Bush will win the election. Mm-hmm. That's all. So I want to find who will be the next Democratic challenger.
Right.
But then I checked, I found two. One is Hillary, the other is Barack Obama. You know, Hillary Clinton is much more famous than him. Mm-hmm. It's more difficult to find her.
Right.
Yeah. When I was doing interview in Chicago, I found Obama will give a speech in a little town called just 100 miles away from Chicago.
Right.
It's called maybe Springfield.
Yes.
Then we are an Asian delegation. You know, some of us discussed whether to do an interview with him or not, because it's Sunday. You know, some of us were very tired after the 10 days interview and report. So 5 of us decided to go, and we rent a car and we get there. You know, we enjoyed the gathering. Mm-hmm. You know, I heard the speech of Obama. I was astonished, and I was very excited, because I listened to Martin Luther King through radio, through recordings. But when I listened to President Obama's speech, I was there. I can feel the people was very excited, mm-hmm. Including me. Mm-hmm. I feel if I was an American citizen, I might vote for him too.
So you based your prediction on that?
Yeah.
Right.
And then as soon as he finished the speech, mm-hmm. I jumped up to the stage. Yes. And I shook hands with him. I just tell him I'm from China. You know, I'm here reporting the U.S. Presidential election. Mm-hmm. Then at that night, after I listened to the speech, I wrote an article to my newspaper, China Youth Daily. Mm-hmm. Just the title is "He may become the first black president of the U.S."
The reason that you got into journalism, originally you studied English, then you did a master's in international relations at Beida, Peking University. Mm. Why? When was the interest in journalism from your point of view? Why did you go into journalism?
Basically, it's for freedom. Yeah, it's two big words, but I mean freedom. It means more free time, and the free to write. When I graduated from Beida, you know, it's a prestigious university. It's quite easy to get a job in the military and the government or in the multinationals, corporations. But I feel I'm not a commercial man. I cannot make money very well, but maybe I can make some. Then I cannot bear the strict rule of the government. You cannot say something freely. You have to go there at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then back at home at 5 o'clock. And I feel if we work for the media, we got more time, more free time, and more space to think over. If I can be a good journalist, my thought, what I write, can influence my fellow citizens. I think it's a privilege, because in my home, in my family, we prefer the intellectuals. That's from my childhood. I didn't take to be a high-ranking officials and a millionaire as my goal.
And then you have worked on and off, or you certainly interacted with American journalists during your time in the United States, and presumably with journalists that are here. Do you see any difference in the way that American? Well, let's talk about American. We hear this phrase, Western journalists, but let's say American journalists and Chinese journalists. The goals that they have, their concept of what the goals of journalism are. Do you see differences between the two?
I see some. So I just want to say from the very beginning, the difference is a structure. I want to mention some about the different structure between the two countries. In the U.S., the structure is from the local level to the national level. For example, you have Los Angeles Times, New York Times, Washington Post. Just as your politics, all politics is local. So that's the same as the media. But in China, it's totally different. All politics is essential. So we have, China News Daily. It's a national newspaper. And People's Daily, also circulated across the nation. And then Economic Daily. We have a lot of centralized newspaper circulated to the whole nation. But in the U.S., you only have USA Today. It's a national level newspaper, but I don't think it's quite a quality newspaper, that can represent the whole.
What about on a more personal level, the way that the goal that journalists have? Now, some people would say that the goal of a journalist is to tell the truth no matter what. On other sides, does telling that truth have consequences? Do you see any differences between the approach to journalism from Chinese trained journalists and journalists in the United States?
I think no matter you are an American journalist or a Chinese journalist, we share the same value. That is to tell the truth. Recently, I got a book written by an American journalist, the 10 principles of the journalism. To tell the truth, to share a message with the public, to serve the interest of the public. I think the Chinese journalists, including me, also share the same value. We just want to tell the truth. But sometimes it's very difficult to define some exact level. For example,
you say what is difficult to define? To define how to tell the truth?
I mean the consequences. So in the U.S., you prefer the very direct way. If two Americans together, if you have different opinions, you may quarrel. You may, punch at each other. In Chinese,
hopefully not too often.
Yes, maybe not for the journalist. But in China, we are a little bit more indirect, including the media. As a journalist, especially as an editor, they will consider if we publish the report, what might be the consequences. Several years ago, in China News Daily, one of my colleagues wrote an article about a local struggle between the peasants and the town leaders. But after our report, the whole villagers from that town get up together to go to the town hall to ask for a solution. Some of the people took a newspaper in his hand. Mm-hmm. That is China News Daily. That is our report. Mm-hmm. It brings unrest. But the good point is that the trouble is solved. smoothly. Everything is
In
okay.
this case,
Yeah.
it was solved.
Yeah.
But there are many cases where reporting of such conflicts, for example, as you said, it is important to tell the truth, where the reporting of such conflicts is basically is forbidden, or is told. Journalists are told, look, please don't cover this anymore.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that is defensible because of the possible consequences, or is it simply that journalists are told not to cover it because it will harm the interests of the powerful, for example, the local government?
Yeah, it is a contradiction. A contradiction within the editor's mind. On one part, as an editor, we prefer to tell the truth. Whatever happened, we will report. It's our responsibility. But on the other side, we have, as Chinese editors have to consider the consequences, because the report might bring some unrest, maybe big loss. They will make a balance. But
So
still, everybody will make a balance between the two sides. But I think American editors might consider the consequences too. Mm-hmm. But at last, they may have, according to different person, different personality, different characters, they may have different choices. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily American journal editor or Chinese editor. But in general, the Chinese editor tend to think more in a general view, mm-hmm. Instead of to look only at the specific event.
And now, when you were in the United States, you spent some time at the State Department. This is the equivalent in China. The equivalent is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, that must have been quite unusual as a journalist from China working inside or going inside the State Department. Tell me a little bit about that time.
Yeah, at that time, I met the journalist I admired for years. That's Bob Woodward, the reporter who have done the Watergate event. Then before he gave a speech, journalists from over 200 countries rushed up to him, asked for signature, asked for to take photos together. That's the second time I took a photo with with the interviewees or the guest. But the other is President Barack Obama. This one is Bob Woodward.
Do you feel that many Chinese aspiring journalists, people who want to go into journalism in China, look towards people like Bob Woodward, or do they look to their own journalists here to inspire them to go into this career?
It's different. If a student who majored, who studied journalism, they may know Watergate, they know Bob Woodward, and they want to be a journalist, taking it as an honor. But for the most ordinary people, they don't trust the media very much. I think it both happening in the States and here in China.
Well, let's talk a little bit about trust of the media, specifically here in China. This is something that more recently has come from China, and this is something which would be very different in many other countries. And this is where journalists go along to cover events and are essentially very often bribed by the people who are covering the events. This red envelope, as we call it, where when you get your press pack, there's some money inside an envelope. Now, it sometimes it can be difficult for journalists. It's considered normal for journalists to take this in many cases. And of course, this has led to mistrust from the public. The journalists are simply working as PR agencies for whomever they are interviewing. How do you view that problem here and the mistrust that it's caused with the Chinese public?
Mistrust is from two sides. One is some official news agencies is losing trust of the audience. For example, when people mention the CCTV, they just sometimes joke, take as CCAV.
I've heard that.
Yeah, you have heard that.
They consider that CC, just to explain to American audience, CCAV means CC adult video, means they consider it as truthful as an adult video, yes.
Yes, but although the CCTV or Xinhua News have done a lot to change this image, but it's very difficult to change. And once I returned from Germany, a friend asked me, do you have something true to tell us? I just tell him I have written all I know on the newspaper. They just said, no, you tell me on table when we have dinner. I don't trust the newspapers.
So they presume that when you are writing the newspaper, that you are writing to a certain agenda, and that if they want the real news, they have to meet you in the restaurant and talk as friends over dinner. That is the level of mistrust of say, ordinary Chinese, even people who know you.
Yeah, yes.
And how, this incident of people, getting money, I mean, that would be an instant firing in the case of say, most, even local newspapers in the United States, if you were found to be taking money for reading a story. But it does happen quite commonly here. It does happen. How can it be cured? What is the way that it can be solved?
Yeah, that will be solved. Actually, I don't know the way how to solve it. If I know, I will do that. But at least there are some newspapers or magazines who just order the reporter do not accept the red envelope. For example, Caijing magazine, now Century magazine, Century Weekly.
Right. So there is your magazine.
My office, China Weekly. We never do that.
Right.
Even we do a report about the millionaires like Zhang Taoyang or Wang Shi, or we don't get any financial assistance from them.
There is a perception here in China that it seems that the Western press, let's say the American press, liberal democracies, Europe, perhaps even Japan, although that's not the West, that when they write reports about China, that they tend to be from one point of view. Do you think that's a valid perception?
I think it is the bias exists, truly. For example, in the year of 2008, the Olympic game held in Beijing, I met a German reporter, and we talked on the bus back and forth together. We talked a lot, and he just told me the Chinese people are very nice, and the Olympic, well organized, praised a lot. I just asked her, well, why not write it for your newspaper? She just said, no. We are not allowed to praise China. We can only do criticism. Maybe that's a tradition of Germany, but for us, we can for Chinese, we can accept the criticism, but we want to show a balanced. We have negative point and a positive point. We want to show the both.
Right. That's something that does tend to come up in Chinese journalism, where they say, is this story balanced? Is this bulletin balanced? Is this edition of the magazine balanced? Which means, is there a balance of good stories and bad stories, which would not happen in the Western press. It's simply, these are the stories that happened this week. This week there are more bad stories than good stories. That's what we're going to tell. Does that exist in Chinese journalism, that you must come up with some sort of balance of positive and negative stories? For example, about the United States, because there is a lot of negative cover about the United States in Xinhua, in CCTV, and certainly in national newspapers here.
Yeah, there's several reasons. One is philosophy. For the Chinese philosophy, for the more than 2,000 years, the praise is preferred. For the Eastern culture, including China and Japan, it's very difficult to see apology or say I'm wrong to any criticism. For example, at Japan, they never say apologize. They never apologize to China for during what they did on the Second World War. They may just say.
Well, I would say that the
Japanese
would say that they have made apologies, but they are not.
It's not formal. It's not formal apologies. It happened in Japan and here in China too. We just, including me, sometimes if you say I'm wrong, I will jump up. I say, how can I wrong? Then I feel, yeah, maybe you're right. I can change a little bit. But usually I won't say, sorry, I'm wrong. I won't say that. But the other point is that China is not, including Chinese people, not confident. I think the U.S., including your journalists, the U.S. government officials, you are very confident. You just criticize me. I don't care. Or if I'm wrong, I just do it in another way. But for Chinese people, now, because we are on a way to, we are rising, but we are not developed.
China's becoming
it's not established well. So we feel just not confident. If you criticize China, it may be taken as insult. You know, it's a...
So there does seem to be very, very sharp reaction from the foreign ministry, for example. Whenever there is a critical report about China, the response tends to be, how dare you criticize us, and we feel hurt, which sounds very strange to a Western point of view. You have hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. First of all, that the foreign ministry can talk for all 1,300 million Chinese people, and second, that their feelings are hurt because a government criticized a government. So you say that is to do with a culture that goes back thousands of years.
Yeah, and another third point is the Chinese people usually cannot split the government, country, party, and the ordinary citizens. You know, we put it together as a country. You know, whatever you see, for example, if you are Chinese, we can stay together, criticize, you know, how, you know, this is wrong, it's not all right.
Right.
But when you are Americans,
foreigner of
we say Chinese is so good, but it has becoming a habit.
Is this something that you think that may change, that people may see a difference between the people, the country, and the government?
It's on the way to the full confidence, but there are a little bit change. It's getting much better. For example, I, including my friends, when share views with the foreign journalist or the foreign guest, we just tell you what we are wrong. We just tell the truth. It's done by the government. It's done by the big corporations. It's a shame for us too. It's a shame.
Can you write about that in your magazine?
Right. Yeah, we criticize a lot.
What sort of pressures are Chinese journalists under, do you feel? What are the greatest pressures for a Chinese journalist who wants to report a story? Because, let's face it, in Chinese journalism, there are orders from the central government that certain stories either must not be reported or they must be reported. This must be reported in such a stage. How do you resolve that battle when you feel something must be reported, but on the other hand, not just you, but all Chinese media are being told, no, this must not be reported. At the moment, there are stories that are not being reported. How do you balance that? How do you work through that?
You know, you ask a very good question, and also it's a question that is difficult to answer. You know, sometimes we fail, and sometimes we are successful, because the tactics, number one, is to report at the first time. You know, just before any instructions, we just file the report. And then, when there's any rules, any regulations, we just
that's called they are instructions.
We have done that. We have done that. That's all right. Or just we just try to report in another way to invite some officials to write a comment on that, because it is getting much better. Yeah.
It is getting better. Certainly over the last, say, 20 years, there's a big difference. Perhaps between 2008 and now, there seems to have been a dip again, in that there seem to be more restrictions being replaced recently on journalists. I mean, can it be worrying to be a journalist here?
I mean, in recent years, it is a little bit rare for the journalist to be fired. For example, last year, People's Daily published an article on the front page. It's a report about Premier Wen. They made a wrong spelling. You know, in Chinese, Wen Jiabao. He put it Wen Jia Shi.
Right.
You know.
They made a mistake in the spelling, but that would be a sort of a technical problem. But if they were to go over a line which they had been told, no, you must not cross this line, you must not report. For example, at the moment there is much discussion about.
But if it happened 50 years ago during the Mao era, you know, some people may die for this.
Certainly, there's been a difference then. But then journalists are detained or arrested on occasions. It has happened. I mean, there is a journalist under detention at the moment, Wan Tao, who worked for the Global Times, about your age. He worked in an English language newspaper, not specifically for writing. Nobody knows, but there is this is something that from an American journalist would say, well, I can write bad things and I may get fired, I may get into problems, but I'm not going to be most likely arrested. That's what I'm saying? Is there a problem? Is there a feeling here, a worry amongst journalists that might happen?
I don't know.
You don't feel that?
I don't know how about others. For me, I'm a little bit disappointed because I feel, you are true. Nowadays, the media situation is no better than that in the year of 2008. But I'm disappointed. But I'm also a little bit optimistic.
Right.
I'm not very pessimistic. It's all dark. Everything will die. I don't think so. For the philosopher, we usually think, things has ups and downs, always. Just like a stock market, you have up, you have downs. But the finally, I think the Chinese media and Chinese journalists have a very good future for some like now Weibo, microblog,
yes,
or our blog. I wrote an article on my blog, and I can tell more than 90% of what I thought. I think.
Right. 10% is still for your friends at the dinner table.
There are always some taboos, always something you cannot tell, no matter where you are. For example, I remember in the year 2004, not 2003, during Iraqi war, your linguist Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky. The mainstream media won't publish his article. It happened everywhere. Bias, stereotype. It happened everywhere. But in China, it's not a very good situation. But I think it can get better.
Would journalists in China, that your colleagues, they would like to say more. They would like to write more. Do you feel that they are pushing towards that, and are they pushing towards that successfully? Is there pressure from journalists to say, look, we would like to write a little bit more about what's going on?
Yeah, there are pressure. It's true, but facing such a pressure, as a journalist can show their wisdom. The more pressure you have, the more wisdom you have, and the more creative ideas you may have. I think that is what I believe. The other point I want to mention is that for China, the main problems, it's not on the upper level as a journalist.
Right.
But for the most journalists, they just take it as an ordinary job. They don't have any value or any idea about it. They even, you pay me, I write for you. Otherwise, I won't write for that. That's a crisis. That's a crisis of ethics. That's a big problem. If there are something is forbidden, for example, 2% of the what happened is not allowed to report, but so some people just degrade it to just report for the multinational companies.
So
even the blackmail the big corporations. That's another crisis.
So you see, this is as big a problem. The journalists who have decided, well, look, I'm just going to do this and make as much money as I can from it. That this is as big a problem as not being able to report certain stories. That there is a problem in ethics in journalism.
It's desperately needed. Yeah, two sides. The two sides are both are crisis.
So Wang Chong, you are optimistic for the future of journalism in China. I'm sure everybody will join you in that, and in wishing you a good future in journalism. Thank you very much for coming on The Level.
Thank you.